So oftentimes I am seeing individuals who are on the street, but they have a child in the district. And there is no separation for me from education, housing, and healthcare. For me, they're all interconnected. They're all the things that we have to embrace. Um, but I'll tell you that when Project 2025 sort of was put out there during the campaign elections, I didn't know what that was. And I was like, well, let me pull this down and read it. And I was in the process of finishing law school. Not that I wanted to be an attorney, I just wanted to go to school to learn how to navigate around some of these bigger issues that I just simply didn't understand how to navigate around them, right? And as a commissioner, when there were things that I was challenging and our attorneys would say, well, that's just the law, or that's just how it is. Well, why is it that way? How can we change it? And what branch of the government do we need to go after, navigate? And so as I was finishing law school, started to read Project 2025. And by the time I finished it, I'm gonna tell you all that I think I gave myself one depression and anxiety over it. And just could not see how we would get out of this legally. This was a legal pathway for the federal government to do everything that they were going to do. And I will tell you, I give them lots of credit and kudos because Project 2025 was not something that they were able to do overnight. They really took years upon years to really study every single department of the branches, every single position, every single loophole that they could find in the law they were going to do. And so, yes, it is part of the plan to cause the chaos, if you will, in the courts especially, because the courts themselves are already overworked and inundated. It is not an area that we like to fund. And that's why you see people who go to court for an eviction. It's an 8-month process at times. And so I will tell you that I also was very paranoid about it and got the reputation last year being the Chicken Little of elected officials, because one of the things I turned to was other electeds to say, hey, are you guys reading Project 2025? Have you read it? Do you see what's gonna happen? And at first I was told, I needed to relax. We're gonna figure this out. And I think people really believe that there was just no way that Kamala wasn't gonna win. And so locally, there wasn't a lot of people who were just as anxiously filled around Project 2025 as I was. And it led to many arguments, even on the school board. I kept bringing it up like, hey, what's our projection plan for special education if they touch Medicaid? And there were just no answers at that time, right? It was like, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. You sort of like, the sky isn't falling yet. Well, the sky is falling, guys. Because the sky is falling. And it's been falling since November 7th. I literally took a week off from work, school, all activities. I was super depressed. And then I was like, okay, let me dust myself off. I have to figure out, what are we gonna do? What can I do, especially locally, to help families? And I've realized in all of this that people just simply don't understand systems. And it's not because they want to be willfully ignorant, but if it's not a system you're interfacing with, you have other things to sort of focus and learn. And so unless you're deeply involved in these systems, you're not going to understand how they work, and you're not going to understand how they are interconnected, right? And because of that, it is why the Trump administration gets to say things like that this fight with this federal budget right now is about health insurance for illegals. Well, no illegals have ever been able to get health insurance in the United States. And as someone who has worked 25 years in nonprofit sector direct services, they've never been eligible. They're sort of one of the hardest populations to serve, because where do they go, right? They are often going to the emergency room, and that is the only place that they really can get treatment, and not proper good treatment, because I worked in the EDs too. There's this treat them and treat them mentality. And so trying to educate people that the emergency room is not the most effective way to deal with long-term health issues. And so we, right now, unfortunately, in this country, have sort of a catastrophic tsunami, if you will, of misinformation, people who are angry about broken systems for various reasons. And the systems are broken, and I want to acknowledge that some of the easy way that some of these individuals were able to sort of get swooped up into the MAGA mentality is because they're frustrated with broken systems and they're not getting out of their government what they feel that they need to be whole and to have, basic food, a roof over their head, education, clothing, and healthcare. Um, and so it's really unfortunate because now we have to fight this misinformation along with fighting for all of our rights. This is the fight for all of our rights and all of our children to have a right to be educated. I often talk too about how this war is really a war on the poor. And it's a war on the poor and their children from all angles. We're going to be impacted with early childhood education at the pre-K level, and Head Start was one of the first things that they're attacking. And I will tell you, we sit at the table, I sit at lots of tables and we have these discussions, but it's, if Head Start funding goes away, the Rochester City School District would not be able to financially sustain that long term. And we know that 0 to 3 is the most critical time for brain development. And there are long wait lists for children to get speech and OT. They often do not get it until a year or two, even after preschool. Sometimes if they're entering kindergarten for the first time, they may not even be connected to those services till 2nd or 3rd grade. That's how many kids are on waiting lists for services. And so that's just going to further compile this, situation. And then we're also attacking education, not just K-12, but beyond, where they're attacking adult education. And I was sharing that this past week, we had a big event at Oasis with the Department of Health and Medicaid, and I'll add a little bit about that at the end because I want you all to know in case you encounter someone who may benefit from this. But we had over 1,000 people show up. We were over capacity, and during the conversations there, Leah, who is the executive director for Oasis, received an email in real time saying that her funding was being frozen because the budget is frozen, and so there's no money for the state to draw down from it to then reimburse school districts. It's just on a hold. And I don't know what that's gonna mean right now. This happened just this week alone. We also have title funding right now, which title funding for teacher education and continuing professional development. Right now, that funding is frozen. There is no money for teachers currently, right now, to move on and, get further professional development and hone their skills. Certainly all of our diversity teacher pipeline programs that were created were under attack. And early on, we received a letter from the Trump administration saying that every single program that we had, and we got a list of terms, some of them that included the word she. Like they did not want us to use the word she in some of our materials. But anything that included diversity, equity, inclusion, social emotional, they are taking social emotional education and have turned this into that it is indoctrination for children. Teaching children empathy and how to deal with their emotions. It is not indoctrination. In fact, if we don't do these things, this is often when we see children who cannot handle their emotions and act out in different ways. But they wanted us to sign on saying that we would eliminate all of those things in order to continue to receive federal funding. And I will tell you that the state of New York declined to sign that letter. So there is currently no big 5 school districts, and I cannot speak for the smaller rural school districts that exist in the state of New York, because there are hundreds of them, whether they have signed on or not. I know that the biggest 5 school districts said we're not going to sign this, and if we need to file a class action as the big 5 or on behalf of the state of New York, that is the path we are heading towards right now. I know that this year, this budget year 25-26, we have our funding. So we're sort of in a position where we're planning for 26, 27, and we have no idea what that looks like and how deep those cuts are gonna be. I wanna talk about Medicaid as well, because Medicaid I'm going back to, again, if you're not in systems and working them daily, you may not understand the correlation. But Medicaid is what pays for special education. It pays for speech, it pays for the occupational therapy to come into the schools, it pays for music therapy. And that is right now what is being fought and debated with the American Care Act, is Medicaid for millions of Americans and Medicaid for people who are too poor to pay for insurance, but make too much to get Medicaid. And those are the essential plan folks. And though that group represents 18,000 people for Monroe County right now, 18,000 individuals who are working poor and make just, they could be over the limit by $5, $10 for Medicaid. And so what New York State did when the American Care Act was, opens up, was they took some of their Medicaid dollars that they were spending locally, since they were getting a cut from the federal government, and they created the essential plan. The essential plan does not exist in every state. Florida, if you are single and poor in Florida, you're on your own. There are barely any resources even prior to Trump. So in New York State, that was our way of like, well, what about the families who still need access to good health care? And if this budget goes through, all of those families immediately lose their essential plan. Under that is also what you might know as Child Health Care Plus. That is another form of Medicaid. And that form of Medicaid, again, is typically, you see that with the working poor. There are people who have jobs at Tops, at Walmart, so they're earning something, but they don't have enough to buy the insurance from the employer. They don't have enough to buy it from the marketplace outright, but they make too much for Medicaid. So it's another form of Medicaid, but it's not quite Medicaid, right? Because there are co-pays for those individuals. So it's not 100% free to them either. And all of those things are at stake, and we do not have the infrastructure in Rochester as it is if all of those individuals were to lose their medical insurance. And all of these things are interconnected. The insurance that keeps their moms and dads healthy and helps keep the children healthy so that they can go to school. If that collapses, there's going to be an uptick of families who are not even going to be able to make it to school because of their medical conditions. I think about one of the first things I thought about when the budget around Medicaid was under attack was I adopted my middle child. She's my brother's biological child, and she came with chronic asthma, and it was a big, learning wheel for me. I didn't know anything about asthma. My child never had asthma, and I didn't have asthma. And she had chronic asthma, which required a change in pump for every season, at times additional steroids. It also required medication for her daily, and increases in those medications during seasonal changes and hospitalizations. And I remember when I was in court trying to obtain custody, there was a battle for her, and I could not get Medicaid at the time for her, which is what I was trying to do, and I couldn't afford to add her to my insurance at the time. I was a poor single mom myself. I was just trying to not have my niece end up in the foster care system. And I remember going to Wegmans to get a pump. And y'all, she is 27, so this is over 20 years ago. She was very little. And the pump was $800. $800. So these are the correlations. I think, how can a family member afford an asthma pump? And so I am outright saying to anyone who will listen that if this budget goes through and these cuts happen for children, children are going to die over things that are treatable, preventable, and they should have access to. Because an asthma pump should not be a sort of a lack of having access, what kills a child in this country. And people can't see that because, again, they don't know systems and how it all correlates. I want to go back to the education wheelhouse and what we're facing. I know $1.1 billion. See, it is a lot of money, but when you're talking about a workforce, 75% of that dollars is allocated to the workforce. We need our teachers, we need our paras, we need our bus drivers. There are going to be reductions in workforce. And the reality is that the district is going to have to even close even more schools this upcoming budget. We're gonna have to further reduce our footprint. We're looking at various ways. Do we cut 10% all across the board? Do we cut out entire departments and programs? Are there partners out there that exist? But that shift is happening for this budget season that will come up for the 26-27. And the federal government doesn't like Rochester. We're a sanctuary city. There are just some things we're not willing to do, and we won't bend the knee. And so, as you all may know, we have a lawsuit currently with the city of Rochester and the federal government around the sanctuary status. But it impacts us too, because we have the largest number of refugee and immigrant children in Monroe County. And we have an academy for them, the Rochester International Academy, and we have schools that are integrated with students, like School 15. That school is 50% refugee immigrant, 50% American speaking, and they're integrated and blended. And those are the schools that I have the most fear for, because in places like Texas, children are being taken right off of the bus on a way to a field trip by ICE. And I will tell you, we have already had ICE take some of our children's family members at School 12 and 2 weeks ago at Edison, leaving that young person with no family right now. Oh. And so, how do you deal with those things? And I will say, planning ahead as much as we can. I think the reality is, you may have saw a few weeks ago that ICE had circled around some construction workers and that the community came out. Well, that's some of the things we're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to stand up for our neighbors, especially our working neighbors. Like, they're just going to work. I currently also have a dog that I've had for 4 months, because the owner got picked up by ICE on Avenue A, and the wife has MS and she's never worked. And so we're giving her support, and I've had her dog, and I'm gonna tell you, we need families to host pets. Pets are going to be impacted by these ICE raids. And there is no place to put them, right? I work intimately with Verona and Lollipop. And they're gonna be they're constantly at capacity as it is. But this is something we're constantly scrambling, right? Someone came to the center, this happened this summer, he just got picked up by ICE, she was distraught, she could not stay where she was at. But pets, we forget about our pets too, and I wanna emphasize that children are being impacted by these ICE raids, their pets are being impacted, and the extending family that then has to stay here to sort of pick up the pieces and figure it out. Back to education, I want to talk about FAFSA and financial aid. And so that is being impacted right now. And what that's going to look like for MCC is that there are going to be students who will not have access to financial aid. They will not have access to, the Parent Plus loans, because they're restructuring those as well, so that they're gonna make it harder for parents to say, okay, there's no financial aid, I'm willing to take out a Parent Plus loan so that I eat that liability. Well, they're not gonna make it so easy for families anymore. There's also the culture of trying to ban books, which we just had this conversation. And you may have seen even locally how that sort of played out with the book, with the parade out in, was it Pittsburgh, Penfield? Yeah. And I have friends who are board members over there of women of color. And that was one of the most ridiculous things, but this is all the same group. These are the Moms of Liberty groups, the conservative groups who are like, you're indoctrinating our children. And those folks actually are in Rochester, in the city. People think that they're not, but I get lots of emails. When COVID hit, we got lots of emails from families saying, open those schools. Kids shouldn't be wearing masks. They can't breathe. And it's like, this is a public health crisis, and we have to take care of everyone. And wearing a mask for a few hours a day isn't gonna kill anyone, but not wearing a mask could. And they didn't like to hear those answers, but That's just the facts, right? Um, but right now, where we are at, we are uncertain about Head Start funding. We are not going to be receiving funding, or it's called Title III, for our immigrant, refugee, and bilingual education programs. So those are going to be under attack, and I don't know how that we're gonna fund those. In addition to cutting teacher education and teacher pipeline programs. I'll be honest, it feels like we're heading towards a catastrophe in education. Um, but what can we do? I think this is going to be the opportunity that we've all sort of been waiting for too. It's sort of like we're gonna have to go through the pits of fire to come out of it and start redesigning what public education should have looked like anyway, because they're gonna destroy it at this point. And so they're gonna destroy it. I think, well, then we figure out how to rebuild and rebuild it better anyway. And that's sort of where I'm at now. I've gone through the emotions of like mourning for the country, mourning for my community, mourning for the people I serve. And now I'm at like, what's the action we can take? And what is the action we need to take right now to survive? And Rosemary Rivera is running a campaign right now on ending prison violence because of Robert Brooks. So I want to shout that out. But one of the messages that she said at a press conference has stuck in my head for like 3 months, and I'm like, I'm gonna get them made on a shirt or something, but it's, we have to survive and help our people survive before there could be liberation. And it's a shift for the advocates and the activists who are constantly pushing towards liberation. And that's where we should be pushing for. But our people need to survive right now, and they need to survive these times. Because what's about to happen is November 1st, there's not going to be SNAP. And that impacts our families. And they're trying to cut funding for school meals. I feel very fortunate and blessed in New York State because we have a state that cares and a state that's saying, okay, we're not gonna allow this as much as possible. And they're trying to figure out which resources to divert, but they're gonna be short $10 billion in their budget because of the federal government. So there's only so much that they're going to be able to also do. I think we start advocating for things like New York State looking at withholding federal taxes. Because at this point, it's my personal belief that if next year, all states don't figure out a way to withhold their federal taxes, we're funding a war against our own citizens, ourselves with our own taxes. So, and I push for that, and those are the conversations I'm having with Morelli, with Jeremy Cooney to say, figure out. And there have been states who have already done it. There was the governor, early on, there was a luncheon with the governors and the president, and she, I wanna say she's from Maryland, got into it with the president, it sort of went viral, and she said, well, I'm gonna withhold my taxes. And she was able to do that because they are the only state that has a separate mechanism to withhold federal taxes than any of the other states. Me and Jen Lunsford had this conversation because I went to Albany right after I saw that, and I was like, we need to figure this out. We need to figure out how to withhold our own taxes because we send more money in federal taxes to the federal government than we get back in return. And I know people are gonna say that the last couple of years, we've gotten more back out of our dollar. However, that was only because of the influx of ARPA dollars and COVID. Our pattern has always been that for every like 64 cents we give, we get less than that in return, right? For every dollar, we get 64 cents back, essentially, that way. And during COVID, for every 64 cents we send, we got $1.13 back. That was only COVID, and that was that influx of cash that came in. So our pattern is that we give more than, and so we are to keep our own taxes in state. We would stop being a welfare state for other red states. And we can fund everything that we need to fund in this state for our communities and our citizens. And so I think it's part of the education of knowing, again, how all of these systems work. We fund Medicaid, not only for our citizens, we're funding it for other citizens in other states. In states who are voting against our best interests and are part of the attack on our children. I will tell you too that right now, you may have also heard what's happening with Oracle and the transition that the district did. And so now we have teachers and paraprofessionals and bus drivers who have not been paid. That is still an ongoing issue. It's the worst time for this issue to be happening. And right now, it is still our lowest paid employees who are still being impacted with the wage discrepancies. So much so that some have even landed in court for eviction because you can't go and work from June till now without a paycheck and pay bills. And these are individuals who also have children in the district, right? They're not exempt from that. So now we're talking about a federal government who's attacking all of these public benefits, entitlement benefits, because we're entitled to them. We pay taxes into it. Trying to take away school meals, trying to take away special education access and resources. And then unfortunately, the district now comes in and is not paying people. And so we're setting people up for big crises this holiday season. The other piece, and then I'm gonna shut up so I can answer some questions. I know I can go on and on because in my brain, all of this is interconnected, right? If people don't have access to healthcare and education, and then if they don't have access to education, they're not gonna understand later on how to deal with their healthcare and how to navigate situations. The Rochester City School District, during COVID, we were able to, one, the state of New York did not allow us to retain our employees, right? So we had a massive layoff. They were saying, no, an employee's not working, you can't pay them. And so it was this back and forth with the state, and we had to do layoffs. And then we couldn't fully recover coming back because all those people went elsewhere for jobs. And then, when we were able to fully open and those ARPA dollars came in, we were making a conservative choice back then to move as many individuals who we were taking from what we call our A line, which I like to just say your checkings account, right? You have your savings, your checkings, you're pulling from your checkings. And then save about 200 million that we currently have right now in our reservoir. So we're prepared at least for a year or two, right, to save some of our own programs if we need to, but long-term, we would not be able to. And so what do? One, I think it's critical that we start to, even to our neighbors, start to explain how critical midterms are gonna be this upcoming year. That's one, right? Midterms are important, and we have to start talking about them now. Because voting has become really like not cute, not fancy for people, so people don't want to hear it. I tell everyone about how critical it is to vote. And they want us to believe that one vote doesn't matter. Like, I know that that's what they want us to believe, but it does matter. And there have been local elections here won by like 3 people. I just want to point out that some local elections have been won with 1 or 2 votes. It's critical that we speak out against it, that when we see it, we address it, that we educate the people around us. And it doesn't even have to be in a combative way. Some of this education, I was talking to a mom out in Fairport, actually. I took my daughter to the doctor's appointment, and I was talking about special education and Medicaid, and she didn't have that correlation. And I was telling her that if Medicaid gets cut, we actually don't know what that's gonna look like for special education in the school district. It would take a huge percentage of the budget, but more importantly, it would impact our children's ability to get those one-on-one services that they are required to by law, and they're entitled to have with an IEP. And she was really confused. Well, how come? Aren't the districts required to provide an IEP and these services? And I said, yes, we're required, but it's billed back to Medicaid. Medicaid pays for those things. School districts and the state of New York doesn't fund that directly. They make us go through Medicaid because in their minds, this is the system where we have put money for medical services. And so that sort of like blew her mind a little bit. Well, what about my child? Well, your child would be impacted too, even though you don't get Medicaid directly, your child will be impacted too. And there's not gonna be enough providers, we won't be able to fund the providers, and it's all interconnected. And I'm gonna shut up with SNAP, because I wanna go back to food stamps, November 1st. Right now, I've heard two different versions from Monroe County. I've heard that they're going to just reduce SNAP by a few dollars for people this month so that they can extend what they have in their coffers at the county so that they can. And then I've also heard that they're gonna run out of money by the end of November for SNAP. And either one is just as harmful to families who don't make enough food stamps as it is to last them a month. Myself, with my family of 3 now and in the home, when I go to Wegmans, I'm spending about 150, 200 a week, and that's just our essentials like coffee, creamer, we're barely home, some snacks for the kid and juice and done, right? 200 with a few items. So I can't imagine what our families are about to face. But on top of not just having funding, even if the funding is there, there are new rule changes. And those rule changes are what the federal government is saying, able-bodied workers. And what that means is that if you get food stamps, they want you to work a minimum of 80 hours a month. And who is that population? They're my homeless folks. They want the homeless to go and work 80 hours a month so that they can get food stamps. There are seniors. Historically, if you fell between 60 and 64, you were exempt from work, the work experience program of what DHS calls WEP. And you were allowed to sort of just be in that limbo as you're transitioning into Social Security. And that is not gonna be the case anymore. And I just can't imagine that we're gonna be asking 62-year-olds to go work 80 hours a week for less than $100 a SNAP. Just doesn't make sense. And they're also making it so that the recertification has to be every month. So you have to prove every month that you worked 80 hours. So even if their funding goes through for SNAP, I just want you to know that the SNAP program itself is fundamentally about to change. And that it is intended to get people off because they're gonna be frustrated and they're not gonna wanna deal with that. Our county is not prepared to handle the certification volume every month. They just don't have the staffing, they don't have the time. It's hard enough to do recertification to the 6 months to a year, but to have to do it every single month, that is what the next step of this is. And I'm gonna shut up, but I do wanna point out that we are 46% completed of Project 2025's educational goals, which includes to destroy special education. They just simply do not believe that children with special needs should be educated. And there are already states kicking out children with special needs. And they're gonna put them in a special school to teach them life skills. And they're asking teachers, do you believe this child will make it? And if the teacher says no, that child is being pulled out of school. And that is already happening across the states. With that, I'm gonna shut up because there's a lot happening right now and I can go on. Yeah. I know, I'm sorry, you guys. It's terrible.
I'm a retired social worker and I spent a good part of my career at Mount Hope Family Center, the city school district in Greece School District, which also, as you know, has a very high percentage.
Second one.
Of people in poverty. And it was bad 20 years ago and people just have no idea. And the web that comes between education, but all the barriers for families to support their children in education. And the whole notion that, well, they ought to be working. There's a lot of people, a lot of my clients who I loved and adored, and helped, who were not employable. And my question would be, who would employ them? Because we have failed them from their own birth up till now.
Mhm.
You know, it's just part of that web. I've thought a lot about the resistance between suburban school districts and the city school district. My two older kids went to the city schools. And we know the research has been out there for years and years and years that all children do better when they're more integrated, racially, economically,
Yeah.
everything. But we get this resistance, and I'm a reluctant Pittsfordite now. I will say that because of our family situation, what we needed for housing, but so I see this all the time, even with my neighbors, which I have a really hard time zipping it. But how can the city build relationships with suburban folks that is not threatening to them, that can bring them along, that can help them see that it's a benefit to all communities when we raise the biggest one in the middle with the highest poverty, and that includes our educational system. All these different school districts.
I know, and a
weird.
very small, like, we do have a lot of school districts in Monroe County, and I'm from the Bronx. So the Bronx is, I feel we have 2 million people in a borough. And we don't even have 2 million people in a county, and we have more schools in Monroe County than we do in the Bronx. And we're just one district. I know, it's just insane.
And so there's a lot of unnecessary money that
Yeah,
goes into keeping them all separate, just like a town supervisor and a village supervisor. I'm like, I didn't grow up in Rochester. This baffles me. But how can we do that? I feel like I have screamed from the rooftops until I finally just got tired during COVID and retired.
no, I know. I actually, this is the thing. I think we constantly are looking towards either government or some entity to sort of lead the way. And in reality, we have to start leading the way. And we have to also go back to bringing people together first, right? Before we even have expectations of them building relationships. We do not bring people together. We don't bring neighbors together. There are people who live in neighborhoods who don't know their neighbors. When I moved into my neighborhood, I went around, I want to know who I live around. I want to know, and I want you to know that these are my kids, and if you see them riding their bikes and something happens, this is my house, come knock on the door, and I'm in the city. And I want to point out to you too, that on Clinton Avenue, there are lots of people with substance use disorder, homeless, or even working, who voted for Trump and truly believe that he's gonna help them get out of this. So it's not just Pittsburgh, there is on Clinton Avenue too. Lots of Latinos who were like, oh, he's the way to go because of the conservative family value that they thought he was portraying. And I'm like, how is that a family value? But I think we start really simply by starting to host events, right? Where we bring city residents and suburban residents together. That's really how it has to start, because what it's gonna take for the citizens to take back their government, which is in our constitution, by the way. Like, hey, this government is not working for us anymore. We have a right to revolt around it. But we can't do that if we don't even know a first name. We don't even know who you are, if you're friends or not. And we are going to have to get past the hump that people voted for Trump, that people got caught up in MAGA. Because I'm telling you, there are people who genuinely may have done it for racism, but a large pocket of those individuals did it out of frustration and just not understanding how systems work. And they're so frustrated that they're like, oh, here's someone that's saying, and I'll be honest, I can be that way in politics too, so I get it, like, and that's why people like AOC too, right? It's the no nonsense, let's just get it done. But we don't do that at the expense of humanity. And that's what people need to understand, that yes, we are all frustrated with broken systems. Yes, we're all pushing for change, and we all could be pushing together for that change, but not at the expense of humanity. But I would love to start crafting up some, let's get suburban folks, you invite some neighbors, you invite some neighbors, I invite some neighbors, and start gathering our residents in Monroe County in small groups, just to do some like meet and greets and find commonality. And I will tell you, the commonality has to be humanity.
We have a question on the screen, so
Oh.
we don't lose track of that.
Okay.
Let's go to Beth Laidlaw next.
Oh, I just want to go to this one and then I'll go to this gentleman right here. The Great Schools for All magnet schools. I'm a supporter right now, and I see Don's on. And to that point, this goes back to what you were talking about, right? There's been lots of research, proposals put together so that we can have one sort of comprehensive. The proposal was also, we pick one school, right? One school in the city, one in the suburbs, and we sort of pilot this. But to that end, there's a lot of political resistance, if you will, against it, and not just from the city. Some of the suburbs and their residents, but again, it's the fear of the unknown for some people too. And if we don't start bringing more people from the suburbs here and vice versa, because there's a lot of misinformation in the city about suburban living, we're not gonna get past these things. It is gonna require a lot of hard work. Unfortunately, there's never a shortcut for hard work. That's what I tell people. It sucks. All of these systems wanna find like the best, most efficient way to do things, like, and sometimes it's just hard work.
I am really, I really applaud, you're bringing up the necessity of just very basic human needs that are going to have to be met somehow, like SNAP, and then unhoused people. I mean, you know, we've got winter coming, and I was at the Speak to Council meeting several times. And if you want to know what's going on in the city, at least for people who are desperate, go to the Speak to Council meetings and you'll find out. All the topics will come up.
Yeah.
People really are desperate.
Yeah.
So having said that, we have a history of, of providing food. We need to get more serious about that. And be more intentional and motivate people just to be on the streets, in different locations and just do this coordinated thing.
Yes.
And we can do that. At the same time, there are some excellent bills that have been really thought through for the state, but also for city council in Rochester. One is for the state, and I really like what you were saying about we're paying in more to subsidize our investors than we are our own people within New York State. And I think it's high time, especially given the current environment, the current situation, that we really put that into action. Part of that is the IONI set of bills, invest in our New York, which has to do with paying, people that what happened in the 40s and the 50s in terms of the progressive taxation, corporate obligations.
Yes.
To pay taxes. I mean, all of these mega corporations that are getting away through all these loopholes is just absolutely insane.
And paying less taxes than us, right? They're making way more money. I saw some 980, I was like, I only paid 4,000 and I'm paying 10 and I barely make, yeah.
So we need to build, I think we need to really do our own education about these proposals that are being developed and actually being greatly supported by activists in the community who have a good pulse, like you do, of people who are being totally, they're losing housing, they're losing, when you lose housing, you lose your continuity of education on a good day, right?
Exactly.
But one of the local things, which is actually the legislation exists, Rochester is intended, if city council will actually, the current city council, should I say, the prior city council were 100% behind it, which is why the legislation is built. That there's a municipal bank proposal that Rochester, instead of sending all the tax monies and the grant monies that it receives.
I sign on to that, public banking.
It goes to downstate and out of state banks to hold the money.
Yeah,
I mean, why are we doing that? And so instead the legislation says, keep it local. Keep it with federal credit unions that are locally held, with local banks, so that we can actually start to fund and provide loans to the entrepreneurs in the city. People want to form their own businesses. They are now responding to the Rates Commission efforts to get NWBEs certified. But if you don't have money to give to loan to NWBE companies and organizations, then how can families find a way forward? So I'm really hoping that we can actually look at some of the systemic changes policy-wise and legislation locally. And Rochester is supposed to be the pilot for the state of New York, so that we can do what is it North Dakota, and then I think Oregon is considering it.
Yeah.
I mean, we gotta get serious about how are we going to keep our wealth here so that we can build generational wealth and close the gap.
yes, and I want to point out, he's talking about public banking. And Harry Bronson is one of the leaders. Yeah, Mary Lupian was actively pushing forward. I signed on to, yes, because, and I'll tell you, when I started at the Father Tracy Center, they were banking with Chase. And I was like, why are we a nonprofit banking with Chase, which is a corporate bank who barely gives back to Rochester, when we have ESL? And I've worked with ESL and many nonprofits, and ESL is really good to nonprofits. They're also, they do a lot of local investment here, right? Not just with dollars and the dividends, those are nice, but we just had an ESL open on Genesee Street. We just had one open on Lake Ave, on North Goodman, in the Save-A-Lot Plaza. That's a real investment into a neighborhood, a community that's long lasting, beyond a job or two here or there. So yes, support public banking. It will bring, we do this right, we can keep our own money that's in the bank that we're earning interest on, and reinvest that money back into Rochester. I have lots of thoughts and ideas of how to integrate even our government. So right now, I was talking about the event I had, the Department of Health, and this has been in the works for years. It's just unfortunate that it launched January of this year, but the Social Care Network is Medicaid redesign dollars for social determinants of health. So we know that if you're unhoused, you don't have access to food, that it's really hard to manage diabetes or high blood pressure if you're out on the street and looking for your next meal. So Social Care Network is, you have to have Medicaid and chronic conditions. So I just want to emphasize, you have to be eligible because your eligibility is through the medical needs. So you have to be someone who has diabetes, maybe depression, right? But there's a screening process. But once we're able to get someone in for the next year and a half, they'll have access to rental assistance up to 6 months. We're in eviction court every Tuesday, trying to prevent as many evictions as we can by screening people. Do you have Medicaid? Do you have a chronic condition? Let's get you screened. You're eligible. I'm live writing checks, like, don't pick them out, because I'm trying to prevent as many, because the housing is absolutely insane in Rochester. And there are more unhoused families and individuals than we know, because they do the count a day thing, which I think is weird. But I find families in abandoned houses all the time. I had a family last year with 2 dogs as well. So a mom, a dad, a son, a daughter, 2 dogs at the Blue Cross Arena. So there are families sort of pocketing and homeless in different places that you would not. I just took a family out of Central 2 weeks ago with the Marshall. There was a mom there with 2 children with special needs. She had been living there for 3 years, and the building was condemned. And so our families are suffering, but public banking will give us money that we already have, and keep our interest locally. And that interest could then be reinvested in a multitude of ways for families. So please support public banking for Rochester. Any other questions?
Do you have some small action plans you want to leave with us? For example, the staff SNAP recertification. Is there a way that volunteers can help people navigate the recertification or it? I'm angry. I'm in the mode of resisting and surviving. So what steps can you leave us at Third Church?
So I'll tell you, I'm working with
People
his,
come through every week.
Yeah.
Food programs. How can we help them when they're here?
I would love to figure out how we could partner too, right? Because I'm working with his branches. They're one of 3 medical providers that's out of the Father Tracy Center. So I have his Health Reach, which are the street medicine folks, his branches, which just launched this last year, their street medicine team, and then Trillium. And so I'm currently working with his branches though to do medical access stations. Right, to work with medical access stations, so the county's letting us attest people for the waiver for the work requirement, and so we're trying to focus on as many homeless people right now as possible. So that they don't lose the benefit, and we're trying to catch as many as we can. But also veterans. Veterans are falling in this gap of like, they're gonna have to go try to work, and so we're trying to do what's called a medical access station. Those medical access stations sort of waive the work requirement, but what we are not clear on yet, because we have not gotten the guidance from the state, is that that also has to be done every month. And so when we start to think about, well, what can we do? It's like, well, I'm hosting one this Wednesday at the library, and we're just telling people to show up with the letter. The county has started sending letters to individuals who are gonna be impacted. That letter will say, here's the medical access station, because there's so many, we're gonna have to do them in like groups and start now. We are setting up at the library from 1 to 3, telling folks to show up, because it doesn't require a physical. Requires a medical provider to look at you and say, can you work or not work? And if you say no, they're just gonna sign off. And again, we're focusing first on the homeless, then we're tapping into vets. And then we'll do seniors, because the county's gonna send their letters last. But yes, I think having the opportunity to introduce Asbury's to his branches and have their medical providers potentially do access stations while you guys have the food bank open. I think those types of collaborations where we cross over, we're gonna have to get very creative in how we support individuals. And I will tell you, I wanna go back to the social care network piece, because it's more than just rental assistance. It's a refrigerator if the refrigerator breaks. It's pest and mediation, right? If someone's living with mold or roaches and rats, and you have a slumlord, we can pay for an exterminator through Medicaid to come out and exterminate for you. If that's where you wanna stay, some people almost don't have a choice but to stay in that unit because that's what they can afford, but they shouldn't have to live with roaches and rats. And if they have a slumlord, we can help clear that. It's furniture access. It's the ability to get transportation to a food pantry or to the store to make food purchases. It's the ability to send someone groceries through Instacart. Like, this is such an amazing, amazing program and has been fought for many, many years. And in a way, it's sort of unfortunate that it's being launched at the same time that all the entitlement benefits are being attacked, because for the people I serve, they have a hard time understanding what's happening at the federal level if this just launched here locally. It's like, no, this is still at risk. We need you to help fight for this, but this is what we're able to do right now. And so this program is being administered through various nonprofits. Blippa, who is based out of Syracuse, they are the administrator over it. And I will tell you, it started in January. People are just finding out about it now. We launched in April. And part of it is that nonprofits, because they themselves are sort of getting attacked, both federally with their having diversity, equity, inclusion things, they're scrambling right now, having to sign on these weird Trump letters. they have had a challenge going through the training and so that they can open and activate. And now I'm on a mission to push them to do so because we at the Father Tracy Center, opened sort of the floodgates, if you will. And so now we have like over 638 families. And I'm like, we're harm reduction. We work with homeless. So trying to figure out how we can get these nonprofits to sort of, I'll tell you what I did. I ripped the Band-Aid. I brought some nonprofits together last week at Oasis, planned it in 2 weeks, posted a flyer, went a little viral, over 1,000 people showed up. Now those 1,000 people know that this program exists. Now they can start putting the pressure on these nonprofits to get their stuff together because we need them too. And we have a regional meeting this week and I'm gonna offer to go in and train every nonprofit myself if I have to in this system. The system that they have to learn, but once you learn the system, you're good to go. You can help people. And I want the county to figure out if 6 months of rental assistance is given to someone on Medicaid, there are crossovers, because you could be on DHS and have chronic conditions and still be in SCN. If we're taking those 6 months of funding from this program, what can the county do for those 6 months of rent that they're not paying for that individual? And we multiply that by thousands of people that are gonna be eligible. There's 180,000 eligible residents in the Finger Lakes region for this program. They know the number. So I think that if we align ourselves, but I'm gonna tell you, when I went to, I'm gonna be talking to the mayor's table about this because they don't know what it is. And I'm like, hey, on the provider service, it's a wonderful program that lets me have actual resources for my most neediest, most sickest individuals. On the flip end of the government piece, it's how does locally Monroe County and the city of Rochester position themselves to have that alignment so that all the money saved through this program that's not being pulled locally, the 6 months of rent for someone, that's a big chunk of change for Monroe County that they could be looking at. What happens to those who are not in this pocket? What about the working poor? What about others who are just sort of out of tapping into a resource because they make $10 too much? We have to figure out ways to take care of all of our people. And I think that this is an opportunity for them to have that realignment. But I gotta educate them on it first, and I gotta get them to be just as excited about it as I am. Because I've taken this and I've ran with it, and so we've rolled it out in April. And now I have other agencies. I'm going Monday. We're gonna train Common Ground Health. They're gonna join the network. I'm meeting with Ibero this week. They sort of joined, but I'm like, you guys could be doing way more. You could be doing more. And they do housing, but they didn't sign up to be a housing provider. We don't do housing. We signed up to be a housing provider. So now I have to like work with landlords, move people in. And we do. I did that crazy event. That's why I almost lost my voice, got a fever blister. I crashed this weekend, but I did all that. And then Friday I had to move a mom from the motel with her baby into housing. But I was able to then purchase groceries for her on Saturday through Instacart and send them directly to her through Social Care Network. Like, there is no other program that exists like this, and we're squandering it, in my opinion, by not pushing our nonprofits and our elected officials to get educated about this program and figure out how to realign these resources while we have this program for the next year and a half. It will be here till March 2027. And I'm gonna shut up. I think my time's up.
Beatriz, thank you so much.
Thank you all so very much.
You're obvious passion with us, and you're helped us appreciate the intertwined nature of all these systems, which is hard to perceive from the outside, but you're on the inside and helping us see that. So thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.